Hello and a very warm welcome to episode 8 of the Money Startup podcast, the place to be for all things personal finance for Aussies all over the world. Joel, welcome, joined by my friend, colleague Joel Kerin down in not so sunny Perth at the moment, looking at the background there. How are we, Joel?
Not at the moment, but God, it is good to be back. You know, recording this podcast, I've had plenty of conversations actually with a couple of people about the podcast over the past, month since we recorded, and it doesn't feel like a month since we last recorded. And, I was just having a conversation with a client and, half the month is gone. Next minute, we're going to be talking about Christmas. So this year is just breezing by way too quick. But yeah, we've got got good feedback on the podcast thing, from the people that I've spoken to. So it's really good that you are reaching out. Again, we love the feedback. We love your engagement. So please continue to send that through. But before we dive into today's episode, which we've got plenty of stuff to talk about, largely around housing, which is obviously a very important part of our lives. Let's just remind everyone that this is not financial advice or personal financial advice. And if you do want personal financial advice, please get in touch with Jarrad or myself, and we will go into detail with you and how anything that we discuss on this podcast is going to be relevant for you. As I said, we're recording this now. It's July 2024. The new financial year has hit in Australia, which is, I'm very glad to see the end of the 2024 financial year. And there's been a couple of exciting enhancements come as part of the new financial year. Superannuation contribution limits have increased. So that is, we use this broadly as a really good tool to save money for our retirement. It's very tax effective here in Australia. If you're an Australian resident, or you've got a taxable Australian property for our expat listeners, we've got the concessional contribution cap there increasing from 27,500 to 30,000. So that's just a little bit more money that we can put into superannuation and claim a tax deduction. And the non-concessional contribution cap has also increased from 110,000 to 120,000. So if you're sort of nearing the end of your working life and coming up to retirement, this could be a really good opportunity to utilize those non-concessional caps to put in some additional money into superannuation, which, if you're retiring in Australia, could essentially mean more money, which is going to be a tax-free retirement income. For our non-resident listeners, the tax rates for non-resident income tax in Australia, so this is potentially income or tax that you would pay on income from your investment properties, that has had a small tweak. So it's come down from 32.5% to 30% from the first dollar to 135,000. And then the other tiers, 37% from 135 to 190, and 45% from anything over 190,000. So it's obviously really good to consider if you are in that sort of area of paying non-resident income tax. We want to try and reduce that as much as possible, and making sure that we've got our legitimate deductions to ensure that we're claiming what we can claim. It could be as much as, completing a depreciation schedule on your investment properties, getting a tax expert around that. I've seen some house and land packages, for example, where a depreciation schedule comes as standard. Otherwise, you could engage in agencies and other specialists to get that depreciation schedule done. Another question that I was actually asked earlier this morning, Jarrad, was, should I do renovations on my Australian property whilst I'm a non-resident? And a couple of things that came up for me, and I'll explain here. So a couple of things to consider is, whilst you're a non-resident, you don't get the 50% discount on capital gains whilst you're away. So that entire uplift that you can achieve on your property whilst you're a non-resident, it could be purely tax deductible. Renovations generally don't claim an immediate tax deduction, so they're depreciated over time. Anything that's a capital enhancement to the property is a depreciated event. And there's also no main residence exemption. So you have to sort of weigh up, what's going to give us best bang for the buck here, and when is going to be the best time to be able to claim renovations on Australian property. So this is going to be very unique for each individual scenario and what the history of the property has been. So it's, very important to consider, if you are renovating your property whilst you're a non-resident, consider what the impacts of the broader uplift of that capital enhancement of the property is going to be whilst you're a non-resident.
Now, Joel, I'm also, as you know, absolutely delighted. We've got one of the experienced agents here in Singapore joining us today for an interview that we recorded previously. So let's cross to that. Let's dive into some of the local insights into what's going on, what she's seeing with the local market, what's happening with pricing, and maybe even get a bit of a sense of where she expects the market to head going forward.
Excellent.
Now, joining me today, absolutely delighted to have with us Jess, Singapore's real estate expert, been in the industry longer than I've been in Singapore. And for anyone who's not aware, that is 11 years for me here. As an expat, as an Aussie expat, we've seen the ups, the downs, the sideways, everything in between. We've seen a lot of friends, colleagues, clients leave Singapore over the last few years. Obviously, rental prices have been taking off. We're all wondering, where to next? When will they drop? Will they drop? Should we buy? So many questions to dive into today, Jess. So really appreciate you giving us your time and, sharing your insights with our audience. I'm sure this will be a very popular episode. Rent, I think, is probably one of the biggest costs that we have as expats, other than school fees and the bus and all of that fun and joy, but certainly property is a major consideration. So I guess before we dive in, maybe tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, how you kind of got into real estate in Singapore.
I am Jesslyn. I have been in the industry for 13 years. So before I stepped into real estate, I was a major in accountancy. I'm actually dealing with all the financial statements, analysis, tax planning, so financial management also. With this background, I realized that some opportunity, I actually get in touch with real estate. So I get to know that real estate is almost the same as accountancy, which you need to do some analysis, you need to know the risk management, you need to know what is the potential like for the, example, like for the companies for the next few years' time. And eventually, would that be a profit? Something like that. So it's very similar product to asset financing. So with the past 13 years, I have a good range of understanding on the residential, commercial, and industrial properties. With all this information, in any case that clients comes to me that they need any services, be it any residential or be it any properties, I am able to assist them. Yeah, giving the best advice.
Fantastic. Certainly a wealth of experience. I guess starting at a very high level, obviously the last, couple of years now, ever since COVID, I think it's fair to say has been very interesting. A lot of movement in rental prices, supply, property prices, all of the above. I guess as we head into the second half of 2024, calendar year, obviously, what are some of the big picture trends that you're seeing, whether it's rental or new developments, buying, commercial, residential? What are you sort of seeing at a high level?
I would say that property prices are already expecting to stabilize after a period of rapid growth. Yeah, because all the house, there is a lot of supply. Currently, there's a lot of supply more than demand. I would say that there are a lot of new properties that are having, going to completion soon. And then the owners are going to collect keys. So actually right now, tenants have a lot of choices to choose from, and resulting that the rental price starts to decrease because there is a lot of supply where there is not much demand. So if the landlords have no, they are still no urgency, they can actually wait, but that the losses that they are waiting for every month for the installment is going to be very substantial, especially when it comes to, there will be income tax, property income tax that is quite substantial over for 2024. Yeah. So this is probably one of the reasons. So property market will start to stabilize or even start to drop a little bit, but it is still in the stabilized market. It's a good time for tenants to actually source for their own properties while they, in the past, they actually rush to, get something that is at a high rent, something like that.
Probably welcome news for a lot of our audience, I'm sure.
And so do you see, Jess, that if obviously how much of a do you see that like Singapore's rental prices are going to decline over into the future? And if so, what's sort of that expectation that we can expect, particularly, in that sort of stage, if we're getting more supply onto the market there, and the demand remains consistent, obviously that is a help for the declining rental prices there. But what do you sort of foresee as a potential there, and in regards to, I suppose, percentage terms?
I would say there will be a drop of like 10 to 15%. Yeah, previously it was like 20-25%. It was quite crazy. The rent before, just 1 year ago, it can increase up to 1,000. But right now, it has really decreased because nearby there are a lot of newly TOP projects. So a lot of vacant units. So I believe a lot of landlords, they are trying to get rid of their rent it out as soon as possible. Otherwise, they are suffering more losses every month for the installments. Yeah.
So just considering it from, let's just sort of say, an Australian expat perspective, what do you think that Australian expats should consider, whether to either rent or buy a property in Singapore?
Okay, the first thing that they should consider is their financial cash flow. Okay, whether to decide to rent a property or buy a property in Singapore. Because when you're first time here in Singapore, when you are, a stranger here, you may not know whether you have plans for long term. Yeah. So probably you are here for it's a new job. You may want to, get used to the environment, the kind of culture here in Singapore. So probably when you're here, when it start off, you may want to rent it first. Yes, for the short term. But as time goes by, if you think that this is a place that you want to stay as a home, you may want to consider into buying a property. Because buying a property in the long run, it will still gives you capital appreciation. In the meantime, if you choose to rent out your property next time, you will still have a property rental income. Yeah, that also works as an investment. You may want to, consider diversify your investment. Probably you have other investment in other countries like Australia, but you may want to diversify your cash flow, your investment into Singapore also, because Singapore markets is also very stable. Yes, and as we know, Singapore is always lack of land, so government is always trying to make use of the land as much as possible, and then to bring in tourism, and then to build up the economy, others. So back to the question. So if let's say they are going to stay for the long run, I believe buying a property is a better choice. But I think I need to emphasize, it's only workable if the Australian becomes a PR. Yes, because the foreigner tax is really very substantial, which is 60%. So it may not be, in the financial cash flow point, it may not be so wise because it takes many years to recruit back this kind of losses. Yes. So being a PR, you just need to pay 5% for the ABSD, additional buyer's stamp duty for the first property.
And for anyone who is wondering or if confused as to whether they heard correctly there, yes, that is 60%.
Yes.
60. So if you're buying $1 million property, that is $600,000. And that is not even the total fee. That is just the additional buyer's stamp duty. So yes, if you're not PR, probably look elsewhere. I think it would be fair to say. Of course, seek personal advice, but 60% is pretty hefty. Now, Jess, I guess if we sort of going back to basics a little bit, looking at Singapore, it's a small place. It's very easy to get around. Public transport here is exceptional. But if we look at where expats sort of commonly live, what are the key areas, the key neighbourhoods that most expats or, Australian expats would choose to live?
I come to a conclusion that these few neighbourhoods are the more popular ones for Australian expats. The first one is Tanglin. Tanglin is a well-established, prestigious residential area. It is very close to Orchard, and it comes with a lot of lush greenery. Okay, but it's actually located away from the bustling, city center. So the popular amenities will be like Tanglin Malls, Tanglin Shopping Center. That area will be their favorite hangout places, and the nearby Botanic Gardens also offers another, amenities for those nature lovers. Yeah. So second location is Holland Village. Yep. Holland Village is also a vibrant aspect enclave and neighborhood. It offers like a unique brand of local and international flavors, though they have a lot of cafes, restaurants. They even have night bars, drinking areas. So these are the areas that expatriates would love to hang out at. And then especially they love to, meet up with their friends and then have a chit chat over there. Yeah. And that area also comes with local food. There is a food center, Hollandby Food Center. So you can get to enjoy the, local foods as much as you want. Yeah. And the third place I come across is East Coast. Okay, East Coast is another neighborhood where people love outdoor activities, and at the same time they love the beach, neighborhood. Yeah. So they can do, especially those with family, they actually, love to cycle a lot, jogs a lot. They love the nature. Yeah, this is one of the reasons. And lastly is Marina Bay, which probably some of you are also staying there. Okay, that is a very prime location. It's very luxurious. It has luxurious waterfront living, and it's actually inside the business districts. To meet up with clients or colleagues, it offers high-end living options. There are a lot of condos also offers like stunning views and of the city and waterfront. So I believe a lot of professionals will also love to stay around there. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, no, look, I think that's very good food for thought for a lot of expats sort of considering either the move here or even if they're already living here, looking at, other areas that, that are popular with expats. Very helpful. I guess if we sort of flip it on its head and look at the other side of the equation, we've certainly been having more and more conversations with expats around, should I buy? Rental prices are going crazy. I'm sick of throwing all this money away on rent. I'd rather throw it all away on interest. I guess at a high level, what does the buying process actually look like for expats in Singapore? If they were thinking about buying a property, what are kind of the initial steps they should be taking?
Okay, firstly, we need to identify, because for Singapore, we have two categories. One is restricted properties. The other one is non-restricted properties. So restricted properties is foreigners will require LDAU approvals. Yeah. Like example, like if you wish to purchase like vacant land, terrace house, semi-D, strata townhouse, the properties that you will need to get LDAU's approval. To qualify for this, you will actually have to be a PR for at least a 5 year, and then to at least have, paying some income taxes. Yeah, contribution to Singapore's economy. Yeah, so this is the fundamental, the basic that you at least have to have. The other properties is non-restricted properties, which it does not require approval, which includes like condominium, strata, landed houses, or even like in the condominium development, or shop house for commercial use, example. Yeah. So, if you wish to purchase property in Singapore, I think, and like I mentioned earlier, the best thing is to become a PR, because I think a 5% is better to pay than a 60%. Yeah. So I think the other factor that is you need to factor in is the buyer's stamp duty. I think there is also there's almost like 4 to 6%, depends on what kind of pricing that you're buying at, 4 to 6% of that particular purchase price they're looking at, that you need to factor in. And then an addition, which is the 5% ABSD that you need to fork out with. And I believe that's the policy for buying a property. And then you have to check into your loan eligibility also. Yeah, because as a PR or as a foreigner, how much loan are you able to get from the bank? And also what kind of bank rates they are giving at. And yeah, I think these 2 points is very crucial, I would say. Yeah, especially you need to down a lot of down payments for new launch properties in Singapore. It's about, you need to pay about 25 25% plus the buyer's stamp duty and the ABSD. So that's quite a hefty sum of money. So you need to actually plan it out, and having an agent to work it out for you, a financial plan, is best choice. So to avoid any, buyer remorse later on, when you bought it, and additional costs like legal fees or agent commission. Agent commission, I don't think buyers will need to pay. Usually, the buyers agent will also collect the corporate commission from the corporate agent. So actually, but basically, the buyers do not need to pay any commission in Singapore. Unless the client is willing to pay. But usually we will not. Buyers doesn't need to pay any single commission. As I mentioned, legal fees, maintenance fees of the property, all this costs property tax. You will need to factor in as your ongoing fees when you have the property.
And just, I suppose, going back on the earlier topic you were just talking about regarding financing and getting home loans, what's sort of the process that, expats can expect from getting a loan from a local Singaporean bank?
Before you start off any search of properties, do a in principle approval from the bank first to roughly know how much you are able to loan up to, and then to at least that, okay, I am able to loan up to this amount, and then we are able to purchase this amount. So it's quite important process. Probably this is the first step you should do. And then once you come to, you have viewed some properties and you would like to offer one of the unit, you may like to confirm with the bank that what is the valuation of the rough indicative valuation for this property. Yes. And then if they can match it, you can proceed to, make an offer with that price. And if it is accepted, I think the process for the bank loan is about 2 weeks. Yeah, should be around 2 weeks. So at least, I think the basics, you will still have to, get an in principle approval before you start off the property search. I think that's the most important point. Yeah. At least the banker is aware that you are looking for a property, and any documents that they need you to provide, you are still in time by the time you actually offer a unit.
And how would you say that, expats can stay updated on the latest sort of real estate market trends and opportunities in Singapore?
Actually, in Singapore, there are a lot of property portals, online portals that are giving like news updates, property updates. Example, like Property Guru. It's not only just a property portal for searching properties, but it's also for a portal to, read up some news about the, latest property, trend in Singapore. And then we have also Age Property. We have 99.co. We have also bricks.com, something like that. So there are a couple of websites that we can actually, have our research on. And then, I think that's the main websites that we can look at.
So Jess, just as my last question for you is, what do you see the future of Singapore's real estate market, and sort of how does that sort of compare for the expat demand versus the local Singaporean demand?
So with the recent cooling measures from the government, so their objective is actually to stabilize the whole market. Okay, with the foreigners, with all the ABSD that has been increased, their objective is actually to slow down the purchase of the property market, and then at the same time to encourage, first-time buyers to actually buy their first home. Yeah, instead of, buying more properties and then to, flip the market. Yeah, flip the real estate market and then to, increase the property pricing again. So that's the main reason. And also secondly, I think the foreign ABSD has been increased to 60%. That is also one of the reasons why the government is doing. They actually sees a substantial percentage that the foreigners are coming in before to purchase the properties here. So actually, with all this increase, it will actually boom the property market, and then eventually, it is hard for us to to purchase any private property in the real estate market, in the future. So this actually helps to stabilize the whole market for a while. But I believe there are those 5 countries under the free trade agreements. They are also have the same privilege as us Singaporeans. So they are also, looking to invest in Singapore, but that is the minority. But the majority ones, they are slowing down, I would say. Actually, this will really helps the property market for the moment.
Excellent. Well, Jess, look, I think you've given our audience, our community, a lot of information there. So hugely grateful for your time. Whilst we won't hold you to it, we'd all love to see a 10% drop in rental prices here. Even 5 would be nice. Anything with a minus sign, to be honest, after the last couple of years would be a bit of a blessing. But look, plenty of key takeaways there, reviewing your lease closely, engaging an agent. I couldn't agree more. We've done both since we've been in Singapore, and not having that agent on your side and solely dealing with the vendor's agent can be just an absolute circus. So I think that's a really important one. But look, on behalf of Joel, myself, and our audience, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much to have me. Thank you.
Wonderful. You'll find Jess's contact details in the notes. So if you're moving to Singapore, you're already here looking for a place, trying to renegotiate, reach out to Jess. I'm sure she'll be able to help. But yes, otherwise, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Jarrad, I thought it might be a good opportunity just to field some questions to you, actually. You've lived in Singapore for, 12 years now, or 11 years? More or less about your experience with property in Singapore and how we can compare that to, I suppose, Australian property and what renting is like and how it's different from Australia and Singapore. So obviously, what have you seen since the time that you've arrived in Singapore to today? What's sort of been the biggest correlation between rental property over time, and how much has it increased more or less since you've been there?
Joel, it's been one hell of a journey. My goodness. Look, I guess if we sort of start at the surface level, the biggest difference between renting in Singapore compared to renting in Australia, I guess, is really who's in the position of power. In Australia, it's very much the tenant. In Singapore, it's very much the landlord. But what is also very interesting is that Singapore doesn't do rental inspections. So there's none of this, tidy up the house, mop the floor, wash the dishes, put all your junk away because the agent is coming to inspect the place. That doesn't actually happen other than renewal of the lease. Now, that doesn't mean you can just, treat the property poorly and not worry about, dents or scratches or damage to the property, because if there is any damage, that's going to come and bite you in the backside when it comes to handover. So that's the other big one in Singapore. When we rent out properties, we actually need to pay a 2-month deposit for the majority for a 2-year lease. If I'm paying $5,000 or $10,000 a month in my rent, that could be $10,000 to $20,000 that I'm paying as a security deposit, which means that I'm going to want to keep the property pretty nicely. Otherwise, I'm not going to see that back. So it also means that we need to be, taking photos, taking videos, recording the actual status of the property when we actually take it over and move into that place. Now, coming back to your question earlier, how much has it increased? Well, gosh, I moved here in July of 2013. Prices kind of went nowhere. We were on a bit of an uptick for the first sort of little while moving into Singapore. Then prices came crashing down with the cooling measures that were introduced. Then they kind of went nowhere up until about 2021, 22. And that's when we saw the significant uplift. So on average, prices rose about 38% in terms of rentals in popular expat areas. But, the majority of expats that we speak to, if we look at our clients, gosh, anything from a 20% increase to a 200% increase. I know, speaking from personal experience, our landlord wanted an 85% increase. Yes, that is 85. Absolutely unbelievable. And it's not like it was cheap to begin with. So coming off a very high base. And for a lot of people, it was kind of death by a thousand cuts in many ways, because through COVID, we all wanted the home office, more space from the kids. We're all working from home now. And we all kind of had no idea how long this was going to last. So we went from a 2 to a 3, or a 3 to a 4, or a 4 to a landed property to get a bit more space. And then the rental increases came up for renewal, or, it's time to move. And of course, then it's time to downsize. So, then it was divorce and all the other stresses that I guess came as a result of that for a lot of expats, or for many, just pack the bags and time to go home. So certainly an interesting journey.
Yeah, of course. And I know that, and I can completely relate that when I go to Singapore, I've been many times over the past even 3 years for work, and I've been able to travel to see, clients in different neighborhoods, and I start to experience what it's like in between. And all of it is so well connected. You've got the MRT, you've got, grabs, which are, very cost effective in compared to sort of the Australian taxi prices. So it's also really quite easy to get around. So I can probably start to relate that, regardless of where you actually live, it's quite easy to get around and sort of see other areas of Singapore as well. When you are renting a property in Singapore, Jarrad, what, in your experience, what's sort of been the standard lease terms? What does it look like to actually have to lease a property? What does it, in comparison to Australia?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. There's probably a few, I guess, common gotchas or common terms to look at. And I would always stress, read the lease agreement closely. There is no one size fits all. And quite often you'll find if the landlord can, I say, to put it bluntly, get away with something, some will certainly try. Now, in terms of a general lease, it's usually going to be a 2-year lease. It's pretty common. Some will be 1, some will be 3. But you don't tend to see a lot outside of that. 2 tends to be common. We have seen more and more 5s lately, which has been interesting. But for the majority of people, it's going to be a 2-year lease. As expats, we typically want the diplomatic clause built in. Now, what that is basically, if we lose our job and have to get out of the country, then after we pass 12 months, usually with a 2-month period following that, we can exit the lease without cost. Now, there might be some commission that needs to be paid to the agent, so read the terms and understand your rights closely. But that's definitely a big one that most expats are going to want to build into the contract. Last thing you want is, you're 13, 14 months into your stay in Singapore, you lose your job, it just becomes a financial nightmare, and now you've got another, 8, 10, 12 months of lease to pay, and then hope to get your bond back. So you've got to keep bank accounts open. It just becomes a real challenge. The other thing to be aware of, and again, this is a little bit different, at least in my experience compared to Australia, is Singapore has what they call either unfurnished, partially furnished, or fully furnished units or apartments or houses for that matter. Now, fully furnished will typically mean that there's a large amount of furniture already in the place and you can move in. You can try and negotiate with the landlord what you'd like to take out. You don't like a couch, or the TV's not quite right, whatever suits you. You can often negotiate that. They may pass on a charge to actually store those items. So if they're overseas especially, there's going to be a cost to get rid of that or store that or do something with it. So they may pass that cost on to you. We then have unfurnished units. Now, unfurnished means there's basically nothing. There's lights, but there's no fridge, no washing machine. The majority of places in Singapore don't have a dishwasher, so there's a luxury we have to get used to living without. But for the majority of expats, we're going to go into what is called a partially furnished unit. Now, that means there's a fridge, there's a washer, usually and a dryer. That's about it. So we can kind of move in. There might be a table, there might be a couch, but quite often we're going to bring those items in ourselves. Now, the other thing to be mindful of here, and it has gotten a lot better since I've been here over the last 11, 12 years, but furniture is not cheap in Singapore by any stretch of the imagination. You can buy, secondhand or relatively new items off Carousel, which is kind of like, the eBay here. There's Facebook Marketplace, so you can check out a lot of items for sale from expats. And quite often there will be an internal app or messaging system with your condo. So you can also check out items that are for sale there. But it's not like Australia. There is IKEA here and probably on par with Australia for some items, certainly not all of them. But land is expensive. So there's no Kmart, there's no Target. You're not going out and buying the 50-cent tea towel and $1 glasses and all that stuff. A lot of that is going to cost quite a bit more money. So just be prepared, whether it's couches or whatever it may be, chances are might be quite a bit more expensive than Australia when you're setting yourself up here in Singapore.
Yeah, that's great insight there. And have you ever found any sort of downsides or big pitfalls in your rental experience?
Look, always interesting ones, I guess, dealing with different landlords. Quite often, it's quite interesting here in Singapore. Quite often, as an Australian landlord, we often, want to sort of focus on the upkeep of our property quite seriously. So, something's not working or something needs upgrading or needs repainting or whatever it might be. Quite often, yes, great, approved, go ahead, get it done, get it resolved for the tenant. Whereas in Singapore, in some cases, if it's a cost, that can be viewed as an out-of-pocket expense they just don't want to incur. I'll give you a recent personal example. We had one of our hot water systems in the unit we're renting break down. There was some water leaks, water damage. The hot water system was broken. And instead of simply saying they would fix it, the initial request was simply to remove it because they felt that we weren't using the hot water system in the kitchen as much as we were using the one in the bedroom because, hey, surprise, surprise, we don't actually shower in the kitchen, an item that I'm sure our landlord is grateful for. But little odd things like that. There can be quirks where sometimes you have to fight a bit more than you would expect when it comes to sort of those repairs and maintenance items. The other one is this minor repair clause, which again is quite interesting. So often built into your lease agreement will be this minor repair clause. Basically that says that when something breaks, so maybe the washing machine breaks down or there's a water damage or an electrical fault, whatever it may be, then there'll be an amount of money that you as the tenant has to pay before the landlord has to chip in. Now, quite often that will sit somewhere between $150 and $300. So if something breaks, you'll pay the first $250. They'll often pay the remainder based on what that minor repair clause is. Now, be mindful of any other terms they put around that. You might need to seek prior approval. There might be special items that are exempt. There might be special requirements. So read that one very, very closely and just make sure that you're aware of what your rights are. The other big one that we see, and thankfully haven't experienced this personally, touch wood, long may our luck continue, but whenever we moved into a new property, and what we always tell clients and just the broader Singapore expat community is when you move in, take photos and video of absolutely everything before your furniture goes in and send it to the vendor's agent. So to the actual landlord's agent, send it to the landlord, WhatsApp, email, have them acknowledge it because that will act as the proof of the quality of the property when you moved in. So little things like scratches on the floor or a bit of scratch paint or there's a chip in the window or the tint in the window is peeling, whatever it might be, get absolutely everything. It might feel like overkill. It might feel like a lot of work, but quite often that will be what secures your bond or your security deposit back when you actually leave the property that you're renting out.
It's obviously very, very different to Australia as well. Like I know we have property condition reports as well, but it's usually just like 3 pages where you're just sort of circling and agreeing to, oh yeah, there is a little mark there or something different. Do you find that there's how can I put this? Like a comparison, like, or do you have competition from the local Singaporeans versus the expats?
Competition in what sense do you mean?
Like getting like if you wanted a property, is there a lot of property available? Are you up against a lot of competition, other expats, other local Singaporeans?
Yeah, look, it's a good question. I mean, to be honest, over the last 11 years, it's definitely changed a lot. A year or two ago, particularly during COVID, there was a huge lack of supply. And obviously, a lot of people weren't really willing to move or go home, or, nobody really quite knew, what was next for the world. So a lot of people kind of stayed put. And obviously with no new supply coming online, and more people coming into the country, that certainly meant that rental prices went up, and there was a lot of competition, both from locals and expats, to move into these properties. Things have stabilised a bit more now, but it very much depends on the area and the actual condo or the development you're moving into. So there's definitely more popular condos, there's more popular areas. If it's newer, or if it's just viewed as better, or they tend to be bigger apartments that are in that building, or there's better facilities, pool, gym, kids playground, whatever you're looking for, quite often you can find that there's a lot of demand, even just within the expat community, for those properties. So you can find that, maybe you're having to overpay a bit more, or, be a bit more flexible in the terms that you're actually negotiating at the moment. We are hopeful that we will get a bit of a drop in rental prices. There's not a flood of expats coming in, and supply is certainly picking up. So yeah, we are seeing, I guess, that level of competition just soften a little bit, which is certainly a bit of a blessing, I guess, after the last few years we've had.
Yeah, for sure. And I suppose just wrapping this little quick chat up, what do you find has been your experience in regards to, I suppose, negotiating rent with the agents, with the landlords there in Singapore? And is there any sort of, key takeaways? Give us a quick little couple of pointers just for anyone moving into Singapore, what they can expect and what they should look out for, and what's going to be your best hot tips.
Yeah, look, great question. Hot tips. So I guess there's probably three things. So one, I would definitely suggest engage a local agent. So either ask your friends, ask your colleagues, ask me, ask our little network, ask our team for a recommendation for a good local agent, because you can have an agent who's basically, their responsibility is to go and find you a property, providing you're paying above and beyond the sort of minimum commission, minimum rental amount each month. It doesn't actually cost you anything. They'll get their commission from the listing agent, so from the vendor's agent. The reason that's so important is not just showing you places that you might like, but it's just so valuable throughout the lease when something breaks, or, I mentioned earlier, your landlord's trying to remove your hot water system, or just something that doesn't really make a lot of sense in your expat brain. They can kind of translate for you, deal with the agent, negotiate the renewal. It's just having someone who is a local Singaporean in your corner fighting for you. That's definitely number one. Number two is understand that not all listings are the same. So you might even find that you actually see the same exact property listed on the same exact website multiple times for different amounts. And those amounts could be wildly far apart. So, you might see a place that's listed for $8,000, $10,000 and $15,000 all at the same time, all for the same property. Why? That's a very good question. So you really need to be careful that you're actually paying the right amount. Personally, I've always relied on the URA website, so you can actually go in and check what properties have actually leased for over recent months. So you can check through everything that's transacted over the last X number of months in a specific condo or condos that you're looking at. Have a look at what they actually went for, what the range is, and that'll give you a good idea to kind of, go to the negotiating table to say, all right, here's what we're prepared to pay. This is fair based on what we're seeing. And even just to get a sense of what the trends look like as well. So if you found that 12 months ago they were going for a bit less than they are now, or heading in a different direction, then again, that'll give you a bit of a sense of what to look for in terms of that property as well. Final thing, I guess, is really just, read the lease carefully. As I said earlier, you may find there's interesting T's and C's that get buried in there. Don't ignore them. Take the time, read it carefully. Don't get stuck with something you're not happy with. And it'll just be such a blessing over time. And that way, both you and the landlord know exactly what you're in for.
Thank you so much for that. That's obviously some great insights right there. As mentioned in the first episode, we'll be releasing this podcast each month on the last Wednesday of the month. We'll be interviewing an expert each month on topics ranging from repatriating funds to Australia to preparing your will overseas. The podcast is available on all major hosting services, so you'll be able to find us, subscribe, and check out any resources we're creating as part of this podcast. And of course, please leave us your questions. And if you have any questions, please send them through. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to hear your feedback on if you'd like some specific topics that you'd like to hear about. We want to obviously continue to evolve this to add as much value as possible.
Thank you, Joel. And yes, obviously, if you are enjoying the podcast, if you are getting value from it, please do leave us a review. Let other people know about how you found the podcast. Share on your socials, send them an email, send them a link, spread the word. Obviously, we want to be providing as much value as we possibly can to the broader Australian community. So as Joel said, this will be released on the last Wednesday of each month. Next month, we have a fantastic speaker lined up, one of Australia's leading experts on immigration into Australia. So plenty to talk about there on visas, PR, the whole piece. We'll be diving into that topic in a great deal of detail. So don't miss that one, as well as obviously there'll be plenty going on in the markets and broader tax updates, I'm sure, for expats. Now, obviously, follow us on our socials. If you are getting value out of this, we're at Money Side Up. We're on most of the social channels. Whether you're getting value out of this via audio, so we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as the others. If you want to see us in video, all of these episodes will always be up on YouTube. So if you want to see Joel and my lovely face, and if that's how you find you learn best, then please do check us out on YouTube. But in all seriousness, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for giving us your time, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.
All the best, everyone.